Marriage is one of the most important institutions in our society, yet today it seems to be under attack.
Those on the left, they really don't like basic Christian beliefs on things like gender, things like marriage.
The progressive left realizes that in order to win elections, they have to divide the church. They have to seek ways to really diminish the strength of the family and Christian community. And unless they can do that, then the left has a really hard time actually pushing forward agendas that they might have.
Many don't realize that the radical left hasn't always held these beliefs on same-sex marriage. Up until 2008, many politicians, such as Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, openly defended traditional marriage.
With marriage, 20 years ago, they had the Defense of Marriage Act, where even all Democrats agreed that marriage should be between a man and a woman. Hillary Clinton believed that, Bill Clinton believed it, Barack Obama believed it.
However, in 2015, the political tide turned dramatically when the Supreme Court handed down the Obergefell decision, which legalized same-sex marriage across all 50 states.
Now they're at the point where if you don't believe that marriage can be between a man and a man or a woman and a woman, you're a hater.
After the Supreme Court overturned the infamous Roe v. Wade decision, there were concerns by the radical left that the Supreme Court would reverse the Obergefell decision as well.
You know, the Supreme Court decided the Obergefell v. Hodges decision back in 2015. But the reason this, which really forced marriage, same-sex marriage on all 50 states, well, the reason this was brought up is because in the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe v. Wade, in a concurring opinion, Justice Clarence Thomas suggested that other precedents should be looked at, including Obergefell. Well, obviously, the House Democrats that made them very nervous. And so Nancy Pelosi, back in July, very quickly, within 48 hours from announcing the bill, announced that they were going to vote on a bill called the Respect for Marriage Act that would repeal DOMA, as well as codify the Obergefell decision.
Congress passed the Respect for Marriage Act near the end of 2022, upholding same-sex marriage under federal law.
The badly misnamed Respect for Marriage Act disrespects the American people and threatens the fundamental freedoms of its citizens.
The Respect for Marriage Act seems to be one of those unnecessary bills that either is in search of a problem or simply a divisive mean or a deceptive means to be able to go after religious individuals and the organizations that they put together.
This new law raises serious religious liberty concerns. Those who simply follow their Christian conscience could find themselves in a world of legal trouble.
The Respect for Marriage has a lot of implications for religious freedom going forward. For one, it gives the Internal Revenue Service a new tool to threaten the tax-exempt status of religious nonprofits that believe what the Bible teaches about marriage and about the distinction between the sexes and about sexual morality. It also makes cases, religious liberty and free speech cases, more difficult to win. And finally, it creates an enormous litigation and liability risk for faith-based organizations that simultaneously work with the government and live out their beliefs about marriage.
The big danger, though, I think, is that it unleashes a bit of lawfare upon religious individuals and the organizations, the institutions that they work with, because it provides this private right of action to people to go after those that want to believe that marriage is between one man and one woman, because that's what the Bible teaches them to believe. And so for the politically vindictive, I think you're going to see them taking advantage of this law.
The ultimate objectives of folks on the other side of these issues is to essentially force organizations and individuals to change, to get with the program, to embrace modern orthodoxy about sexuality, or in the alternative, to shut down.
Many argue that the government shouldn't be involved in marriage at all, noting that marriage is a religious covenant.
Marriage is a pre-political right. People come together naturally and get married and have children and have families. This is a natural human phenomenon. The state, gives you a license, says you have to be a certain age, but the state doesn't create marriage. Marriage is a pre-political institution. But the only way the state could treat same-sex marriage the same as opposite-sex marriage was to say that biology doesn't matter. The biological correspondence between male and female is not what makes a marriage. It's your feelings. It's whether you have this, close emotional connection. Well, we have lots of close emotional connections with lots of people. So which ones qualify as marriage? Well, the state says which ones.
They want to tell religious schools that they can't hire faculty who live according to their moral standards. They want to force every business in the United States to allow people to use private spaces consistent with their gender identity rather than their bodily reality. They want to force every employer in the United States to use people's preferred pronouns even when that conflicts with an individual's conscience and their beliefs about realities.
This attack on marriage is part and parcel of the Marxist ideology that has been adopted by many radical leftists today, where the destruction of the family is key.
A consistently Christian worldview is an immediate threat to the left's agenda, which is why you have leftists throughout history who have said those exact words. Karl Marx himself identified Christianity as one of the chief impediments to the establishment of globalized workers of the world uniting.
It's very important to understand that Marx believed in the destruction of the family. The reason for that is he said that oppression was the key to history. And in Marx's playbook, men oppressed their wives, parents oppressed their children, they took them to church, and God was the ultimate oppressor. So if we can remove all of that oppression, finally people will be free, they'll live together without crime, and everything is going to move along and be happily ever after.
The traditional concept of marriage has been virtually hijacked and has drifted further and further away from its biblically intended purpose.
Jesus was asked the question regarding marriage. He says, in the beginning, God made them male and female. And the man shall leave the father and mother, cleave to his wife, the two shall become one. So they're trying to say, if you're really Christian, you'll let them teach stuff to little children that Jesus would never teach. So in other words, if you're really Christian, you won't act like Christ. That's their strategy, that's their tactic. And Christians, unfortunately, have been buying it, saying, well, I got to tolerate this, I'm Christian.
If you open the door to same-sex marriage, you open the door to everything else. It's either God's way or everything else. I specifically argued, well, what would be the objection to polygamy if you embrace same-sex marriage? What would be the objection to other iterations of sexual orientation? Which, by the way, I would remind everyone, the most popular acronym is LGBTQIAP2S+. What's the plus there for? There are TEDx talks right now. There's a professor from Germany, Mirjam Hein, who's arguing that, they're not pedophiles or pederists, they're minor attracted persons, and minor attraction is just another sexual orientation.
The Bible's not clear about every single issue that we face, but there are some issues, such as the issue of marriage and sexuality, where there's a thus saith the Lord. There's a chapter and verse, and if we're not teaching that from our pulpits, our people in our congregations will hear it, but they'll hear it from the media, they'll hear it from Hollywood, but if they're not hearing from the pulpit, they're not going to be hearing what God believes about these issues, where, again, I think the Bible speaks clearly.